Good afternoon and welcome to the final webinar in our first ever virtual expo and webinar series. We've had an amazing participation in this series and I want to thank everyone for making it so successful. My name is Al Manzi. I'm the president and publisher for, president and CEO rather, for Prairie Mountain Media, and a publisher for the camera and a moderator for today's event. This is our lucky number 13 in our series entitled Senior Housing Part 2. I want to remind everybody that one of the best parts of these presentations is the question and answer period that follows the 40-minute presentation. Look at the bottom of your screen and you will see a Q&A or a chat feature that you'll be able to type into, so you can ask the questions anytime during the session. We won't take them until the end, but they will accumulate in there, so we'll have a nice big broad selection of questions to work from. Today's presentation, like I said, will last about 40 minutes, and afterwards we'll have that 20-minute, hopefully very vibrant question and answer period. Now let's get started. Today we have Shelley Stewart-Girton, Director of Sales and Marketing for Avenida, Lakewood. So please welcome Shelley Stewart-Girton.
Thank you all. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our presentation here. Okay, so yes, Avenida Lakewood, Director of Sales and Marketing. I know it's not the easiest one to say, so thanks Al for trying on that. My goal today is to give you all some good information about senior housing options that are available to you. See if I can get my, oh, it doesn't seem to want to advance. Hang on just a second here. We'll try this again. Okay, there we are. Okay, so just a little bit of background on myself. I have 18 years in real estate. I was a senior specialist when I was actually doing real estate. And then about 10 years ago, I became a licensed practical nurse. I've managed medical and non-medical home care services. That's actually how I got into senior living and found that that's where my passion really lied. 10 plus years experience in senior living, including independent living, assisted living, memory care, and now active adult. That's where I'm at this time. I'm definitely passionate about working with older adults and helping them kind of figure out the best options available for them if they're thinking about making a change. I currently live in Arvada with 2 teenage boys and a husband who is serving at the Air National Guard at Buckley Air Force Base. So there's some questions that I want people to consider. If you are thinking about making a change, there's some things you need to ask yourself and really think about before you start looking. One of those questions, of course, is do I need care services? And if so, what kind of care? You know, do I need assistance with bathing? Do I need assistance with meals? Do I need other kinds of care? Do I need more medical care? Those are things you really want to be thinking about. Do I need a meal plan? Am I sick and tired of cooking? I don't want to have to ever turn a stove on again. Do I need on-demand transportation services? Am I not able to drive anymore? Have things changed so much in my life that I really need to know I have transportation available to me if and when I need it? Am I tired of home maintenance? You know, repairing roofs and painting and shoveling snow, fixing leaks, cleaning out things, doing housekeeping, all of that are things to consider. Am I feeling isolated? And do I want to be around more people? Have I started to feel like my world is shrinking around me and it's getting harder and harder to go out and have that network of people around me that provide support and socialization that I really need? Is my family concerned about me living alone? Have they started asking questions or making comments? Do I want to be involved in more activities? Do I wish I had more things to do? Am I feeling like My life is starting to miss some purpose. Do I wish I had things to do indoors when the weather is unpleasant? We certainly deal with that here in Colorado. There's days where we just really don't want to be going out. And if that's the case, do I still wish I had things that I could be doing? So I'm going to get into the different levels of care, and I'm going to try to go through what they really provide, what they really cost, how people really pay for them, things that you can expect to find. One of the things I'll talk about is the fact that there's so much variation from community to community, even within the different levels of care. So it's really important, and I'll reiterate this at the end, that you actually really make a plan to do some good research. So these are the 6 different things that we're going to look at for housing options for our older adults. Of course, we have skilled nursing or long-term care, assisted living, independent living, staying at home, of course, that's always an option, continuing care retirement campuses or communities, and then finally active adult. And active adult is a little bit newer available in our market these days, so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about what that looks like too. So the first one is skilled nursing or long-term care. Back in the day, people used to call them nursing homes. Everyone's kind of familiar with what that is. This, of course, is going to include all of the medical care that you will need that does not have to be done in a hospital setting. So all of your personal care, bathing, dressing, all of that, all of your meals, laundry, housekeeping, transportation if it's appropriate. Sometimes they do provide transportation and take you to see specialists and things like that if that's needed. And they usually will have some limited social activities. That's not at the forefront of what they're providing. That's pretty secondary to making sure all the care and things that are happening that need to. Also, if you're there doing rehabilitation, the big focus is often on occupational therapies, physical therapies, things like that. This could include memory care, which really the differentiation for memory care is just that it's a secure environment. So that if someone has developed some significant dementia and are wandering, they can keep them safe from wandering out of the community and something bad happening. Typically, the average age in skilled or long-term care is 85. The average cost for long-term care is typically between $10,000 and $12,000 per month. Now, this could vary across the country. The numbers that I put together for this today are really based on average costs here in Colorado, which you can expect to have to pay. And this is also helpful if you're planning retirement funds and how much you need available. This is something to be aware of. So yeah, $10,000 to $12,000 per month. Now, if you're there doing a rehab stay, say you've had a change of condition, you've had a fall or an illness that's come up, and now you're there just doing some rehabilitation, doing some therapy, getting stronger, that kind of thing, that's typically going to be paid for by Medicare and any supplemental insurance that you have. And that is normally going to be on a short-term basis, usually not more than about 100 days total. And the expectation then is that you would go back into some sort of residential setting, whether that's back in your home or perhaps back to a community, if that's where you were staying before. The goal is that they're going to get you back to your previous baseline and get you moved back into a residential setting. The next level would be assisted living. So this is kind of one step below skilled nursing or skilled long-term care. This is going to, again, be all of the medical care that you need provided that doesn't have to be done either in a hospital or in a skilled nursing setting. This will include all of your personal care needs, again, bathing, dressing, all of that if that's needed. They will provide all the meals, all of the laundry, all of the housekeeping. There'll be some limited transportation services typically available, and of course some activities and social engagement opportunities as well. Now there's a lot of variation from assisted living to assisted living and what they can provide in terms of level of care. And a lot of that has to do with levels of staffing. What kind of nursing staff do they keep available? Do they have RNs there full-time, or do they only have LPNs? Things like if you have diabetes and you need a sliding scale insulin, they may not be able to provide for that. Sometimes that can only be done in a skilled setting unless they are staffed appropriately to handle that. Sometimes they can do 2-person assists. Other times, you know, they can only do 1-person assist with a transfer. So those are kind of things you need to be keeping in the back of your mind. If you're needing care, there's a lot of variation from assisted living to assisted living on what amount of support they can provide when it comes to care. So just need to keep that sort of in your mind. Also, this can include memory care. A lot of the assisted livings will have an attached memory care. Again, that's just that it's a secure environment. And again, the average age typically is 85 in the assisted living realm. Average cost is typically $4,000 to $9,000 per month. The cost is typically paid by private pay. Some long-term care policies will help cover some of the cost. So I want to talk about long-term care policies a little bit further. Many times people have purchased a long-term care policy way back when and haven't looked at it in a long time and really don't have a clear understanding of exactly what it's going to cover, or maybe over time that long-term care policy has added additional riders that provide additional coverage, or maybe they've made changes to the coverage. If you have not looked at your long-term care policy in a while, it's important that you pull that back out and take a look at it. If that's something you need assistance with, you can contact me. I'm happy to review policies with people, and I've done it many times. My contact information will be up at the end of this presentation, so if you need some assistance with that, please let me know. I'm happy to help with that. Some long-term care policies will only cover long-term stays in skilled nursing environments. Some policies will cover long-term care as well as assisted living care. Some policies will provide for home care. So there's a lot of variation. So if you're not sure what your policy includes, you want to take a look at that. And then for assisted living, in some cases, it can be paid for by Medicaid. There are Medicaid communities around that will help pay for assisted living stays. You do, however, have to get down to $2,000 worth of assets and then apply for Medicaid. And it's quite a process to apply for Medicaid. So if that's a direction that you think you're headed, you want to be looking for some assistance with that sooner rather than later, because it takes several months to get the Medicaid application process in place. I will say too that typically what I have found is that the Medicaid communities, because the reimbursement rates are so low, often that the staffing levels and the programs and activities aren't quite as robust as they would be in other communities. So just things to consider. So we move now to independent living. And again, there can be a lot of variation from independent living to independent living community. So if this is the direction you think you're headed, you really want to do your homework, you really want to go visit each community, you want to have a list of questions that you'd like to go and ask. Independent living typically will could possibly include some personal care or medical care. A lot of the independent livings around today have some on-site home care services available, or they're bringing in outside agency to provide some home care services or medical care. Usually that's going to be at an additional cost on top of whatever your normal monthly rent is going to be. Most independent livings include some sort of a meal plan, an option to add a meal plan, transportation on a scheduled or on-demand basis depending on the community. Again, that can vary from community to community. Usually they have a fairly involved social calendar with lots of activities and programs and things to get involved in. Most of the time they provide linen services and housekeeping services either on a weekly or every other week basis. And again, the average age is 85. So that doesn't change a whole lot in independent living from assisted living. Just typically you're going to see that the residents are a little more active in independent living than what you'll see in the assisted living communities. Average cost for independent living. Most independent living start at about $3,000 a month, and that's going to be for a one-bedroom apartment that's maybe 600 square feet, 620 square feet, something like that. It can go up as high as $6,500 per month, typically for a two-bedroom apartment. There's a pretty big range on pricing. I'm aware of some communities in the Denver area that are actually considerably higher than the $6,500 a month, but those are pretty fancy, beautiful communities, but they're also costly. So I'm giving you what I think is sort of the average in the industry in Colorado. In independent living, the cost is pretty much always private pay, so you're paying out of your own pocket. There are a few subsidized communities around. There's not many. There's typically long waiting lists to get into those, and there's income restrictions on those, so you have to go through an application process, and they do verify income. And then independent living communities vary from community to community as far as what they will look at in terms of a financial investigation. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I get to the Ccrc. So staying at home, that is certainly an option. And I think in my experience in the 10 years I've been doing this, I see that oftentimes people's preference is the idea, the want to be able to stay at home and not have to consider a move, especially if they've been in their home a long time. Maybe they've been there 40, 50 years and they raised their children there, and they just have so many memories and so many belongings and things like that, that sometimes staying at home feels like it's the better option. There are lots of things to consider if you're going to stay at home. Of course, there's things like home maintenance expenses, maintaining roofs and paint and, of course, all kinds of interior things. You'll have to consider whether you would like housekeeping services to be brought in if that's something you're needing assistance with. Everyone has probably heard of Meals on Wheels. What I have found with people who've used Meals on Wheels is they don't like the food a whole lot, but they really like the visits from the people that do the deliveries. A lot of times those Meals on Wheels tend to sit in people's freezers and not get eaten a whole lot. But nowadays, there are a lot of options to deal with having meal delivery services. You can have anything from fully prepared meals that just need to be warmed in the microwave to partially prepped meals that are easy to finish off in a pan and get onto the table in 15 minutes. So there's a lot of options available in different kinds of meal programs. Also, we'll have to consider transportation needs. Are you able to drive anymore? Or do you need to have, Uber or Lyft to provide on-demand transportation? There are a number of resources around that can provide rides, usually on a more scheduled basis. Like, for example, Senior Resource Center, they cover most of the Denver metro area. They require at least 3 days notice. So if you know your doctor's appointments or things like that ahead of time, you can get that scheduled, and they will provide transportation assistance for that. I want to mention something that's called aid and attendance benefit. This is a benefit that exists for our veterans, and this is a very separate benefit from disability benefits for our veterans. This is for veterans who served during a wartime period, and now need care and assistance. And that has to be with at least a couple of what we call ADLs, or activities of daily living, typically dressing, bathing, eating, things like that. If they're needing care and assistance with that, there is this benefit that's called aid and attendance that can help with that. Again, there's an application process. It takes several months, in most cases, to get it in place. But if you are needing care at home, you can use this benefit. You can also use this benefit if you are in assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing. It can also help in those settings as well to help offset some of that cost. And typically, the numbers change a little bit every year, but right now, I think for a married couple, and one of the spouses is a veteran that qualifies, The benefit's like $2,200 a month, so it's a good benefit. If you're the spouse of a veteran that has passed, I think it's like $1,200 a month reimbursement to help with care costs. And then if you're just the veteran yourself, I believe it's $1,700 a month. But again, those numbers change a little bit from year to year, so you want to do some checking if that's a benefit you want to look into further. Again, we talked about LTC policies or long-term care policies. They didn't used to include home care, but over the last probably 10 to 15 years, they've altered a lot of those plans, and now a lot of those long-term care policies have added on riders where they actually do help cover home care assistance. So bringing in outside care from agencies into the home to provide help. A lot of those policies now provide some coverage for that. So again, if you haven't looked at your policy lately, this is something you want to look into. But something I like to talk about that's really important is something I see happen often is when people choose to stay in their homes. Isolation and loneliness can be a big concern. There's been a ton of research and a ton of data that has really showed us that our older adults do not age well if they become isolated. They're much more prone to illness, increased pain, more medical issues, more hospitalizations, longer recovery periods. So that isolation piece is really something you want to be thinking about. If you're going to try to stay in your home, long term, you need to really be considering what that's going to look like for you, because it's a big concern. In fact, just on a side note with this whole COVID situation, we're seeing that because people are staying in their homes or they're staying in their community and not going out and about and having visitors, we're seeing a lot of decline just due to the isolation. And that's a whole other topic with the virus issue, but it's really concerning to see that isolation is affecting people as much as it is. So just really consider that. The other thing is, in your home, you're typically not going to be able to take advantage of, a calendar of scheduled activities and programs and things that are going on, which you'll normally going to find that in a senior living community. There's also not as many resources available to you if you're staying at home. Most of the time, if you're in a community setting, you're going to have a lot of resources that can come in, mobile dental services, mobile pet care services, mobile veterinarian, all kinds of, things that can be brought into the community that you're not going to have available to you if you stay in your home. So something else to think about. And then, of course, back to the expense piece of things. There might be HOA fees. Of course, there's always property taxes and insurance fees. Those tend to go up every year. I don't ever really see those going down. So those are just things to think about from a financial perspective, in addition to some of those other considerations of staying at home. So if you stay at home and you end up in a situation where you need 24-hour assistance or care, typically we're going to see this happen when somebody develops some pretty significant dementia and maybe they're not safe to be left alone. They need to have someone with them at all times. Your costs for bringing in home care to do that are going to run on the high side, $15,000 to $23,000 a month if you need 24-hour care. So that can be a very expensive option for people, but I do see often that that's where it goes if somebody really needs that level of assistance and needs to just truly have somebody with them at all times, and there's not a family member or someone else available that can take that on. Most home care companies charge anywhere from $32 to $35 an hour, and most of them are going to require at least 3 days a week with a minimum of 3 to 4 hours each visit. And so on the very low side of home care costs, you're looking at least $1,500 a month if you're just getting care a few times a week for just a few hours. Most of the time, what I've observed with home care and staying in your home is people need a lot more than that. And so they're typically going to be paying, somewhere between the $1,500 and the $23,000, depending on what level of support they're needing. So if you're planning to stay at home, you want to make sure from a financial perspective, you're prepared for that, what that can cost. what is a CCRC? So a CCRC is a continuing care retirement community or campus. Either word applies. Most of the time, these are going to be a combination of multiple levels of care. In some communities, you'll see that they have cottage homes or little patio homes. They're also going to typically have an independent living attached or somewhere on the campus. They're also going to have an assisted living, also usually a memory care. It may be attached to the assisted living or is part of that. And then most of the time, they're also going to have skilled or long-term care available as well. For those of you in the Boulder area, the common one that you guys are probably familiar with would be Fraser Meadows. They've been around forever. In the Denver metro area, a lot of people have heard of Windcrest. That's a huge campus that's got all the different levels. With a CCRC, you're going to be looking at a buy-in. A lot of us in the industry, we refer to these as buy-in communities. And you're going to be paying an upfront chunk of money that's going to be anywhere from $100,000 to $800,000. And it can go up from there. I've heard of other communities that were more, but in Colorado, that's typically the average. And I know that's a huge range of costs, but the reason for that is there's different levels or different tiers that you can buy in at. And depending on what tier you buy in will affect a couple of things. Will affect how much money you get back when you leave or you pass, and also affects what your monthly rental rate is going to be. Because in addition to the buy-in amount, there's also going to be a monthly rental amount for whichever apartment you choose. And that, the range on that is vast. So it can be anything from, $2,500 a month to, I don't know, $7,000 a month, depending on the size of the apartment and all of that. So the views, and there's lots of considerations in the pricing, but so the cost is always going to be paid privately with this CCRC. There are not subsidized communities that are CCRCs, and typically, unless you're in the assisted living or the skilled area of the community getting care services, your long-term care is not going to kick in, and Medicare is not going to kick in those situations either. And also because you have too many assets to even consider Medicare. One of the things that they promise is to continue to provide care even if you run out of money. Something you should know on that, and the caveat to this, is that they will do a very thorough financial investigation to determine if you're going to run out of money or not. They will also do a health history and physical to take a look at, what disease processes you might have, how long do they really think you're going to live, what levels of care do they really think you're going to need. And sometimes if you've already got some what we call comorbidities or multiple disease processes that eventually they know will lead to death, they may not even let you buy in and move into the independent living. They may say, you have to just move into the assisted living right away. So they do a pretty thorough investigation of the situation to ensure you're not going to run out of money, and that they will be able to, take care of your needs where you are right now. The other thing to remember on this is that no community can truly promise to care for you forever. There are certain circumstances where you could develop care needs that are beyond what they are staffed to manage. For example, if you developed severe dementia and you developed some behaviors that they were not staffed to deal with or handle, they would be giving you notice and asking you to find another place to live. So no CCRC can truly make the promise that they will care for you no matter what. Actually, no community can truly make that promise to you. So that's just something else to be thinking about. They sort of sell you on the idea of they'll take care of you no matter what, even if you run out of money, they're there for you. It's not entirely true. There are some caveats to that. And then again, most of the time they do plan to refund some portion of your initial buy-in, either when you leave or when you pass, and that money typically then would go to your family. And again, how much they're going to refund really varies on on what kind of level or what kind of tier you bought in at. So if you're going to look at a continuing care retirement community, you're going to want to do your research, and you're going to want to go in and ask those hard questions and make sure you're getting good answers. I want to make sure I don't go over on time here. Looks like we're good. And so active adult is really a newer, for lack of a better term, a newer product line to the senior living arena. It hasn't been around all that long. These communities, at least in my experience, are newer, and what they're really trying to offer is kind of a resort style of living, and trying to offer you a lot of the really wonderful things that senior living has to offer, but not necessarily that care piece. And there's only a few, there's not a whole lot of these around yet. You'll see probably more and more of these coming to the market over the next 5 years. You're going to see that they will include things like concierge services. They're going to be really heavy on amenities, lots and lots of amenities. The goal is to give you, like I said, that resort style of living with lots of amenities to enjoy. They're also usually going to have some kind of resident enrichment program. Now, I have seen that this varies quite a bit from community to community on how active that program is. For example, the community I live at, we do what we call a 5 to Thrive program. And so we build programs around kind of 5 key elements that we know promote healthy aging, but not all communities offer that. Some may just offer, you know, a little bit of activities and programs. So it depends on what's important to you. If you're looking into active adult living, you want to kind of check that out and see what's most important to you. For example, we provide a continental breakfast where we are. Not all active adult communities provide that. That's just something that we happen to do. The average age, now you'll notice here, it's about a 15-year difference from active adult to independent living or the assisted living or even the skilled nursing. So it's about a 15-year difference in the average age. So the cost for active adult, again, a big range on this, anywhere from $1,700 up to about $5,300. All of these communities are private pay communities. There are a few affordable communities around, and some that might even be subsidized. Again, there'll be an application process for those kinds of communities. There'll be income verification. Most of the time they're looking at, you know, people with incomes below $50,000 a year, or maybe even $40,000. It depends on what particular community and what the income levels are for that particular one. But so there's, like I said, a pretty big range on price here. Like we start at $1,700, but for example, Epic and Gurdon, they're a very fancy, beautiful community. Their price points start a little higher than ours, but that's just, they did some very nice finishes in their apartments and their focus was a little bit different than what our focus was. So there's just some variation on that. So just to kind of wrap things up here a little bit, moving doesn't have to be hard. I think probably one of the biggest challenges I see for people is if they are considering making a move is they feel a little overwhelmed by their home, their stuff, and how difficult it can be to manage all of that. I want to encourage you, if you're considering making a move, know that there is help out there. There are professional organizers and senior move managers who literally provide any level of assistance that you need, all the way from helping you pack, moving you, unpacking you, disposition of all of the rest of your belongings. If you're struggling with how to manage that piece, they will help you with if you need to get things sold, if you need to get things donated, if you need to get things just recycled or gotten rid of. They will help disposition all of that and make that happen for you. You, of course, will have to make some decisions along the way about things that you do want to take with you. But I see that that can be an overwhelming process for people. Sometimes even just the thought of it is a huge hindrance to considering making a move. So I just want to encourage you that there is help out there for all of that. Of course, there's places like ARC and Goodwill action center, senior action centers, Habitat for Humanity, they'll come, most of those will come and do pickups of items if they're things that they will take. And then of course there's realtors and repair people, professional stagers, people to help get your home ready for sale if you've decided that's the direction you'd like to go. We happen to use a company called Marketplace Homes. They actually do the entire process of getting your home ready for sale and seeing it through to guaranteeing a sale for you. So that's just an option that's available, like I said, if you've decided that's a direction you want to go. So, big thing, I know I've said this a few times today, but I really want to reiterate this, is do your research. If you're thinking about making a change, it's so important that you visit the communities you're most interested in and that you ask plenty of questions. I've had people come in with 4 pages of questions, and while that might sound like, oh gosh, I'm actually glad, because I want to make sure that I'm a good resource to people and that they are getting all their questions answered, and that if they make a decision to move, that they feel confident about where they've landed. The worst thing for those of us in this industry is to have someone move in only to be unhappy or frustrated that it wasn't the right fit. So please do your research. Put together those long lists of questions. We're happy to answer them. Again, revisit your long-term care policy if you've got one and you've not looked at it in a while. And just remember that your 2 most expensive options is staying at home or a buy-in community, those Ccrcs. Those typically are your 2 most expensive options. Try to be aware of some senior resource options like different transportation providers, the aid and attendance benefit that I spent a little bit of time on, different meal programs that are available, and find a local resource guide. I find that these are helpful for people when they're starting their search. There's things like the Senior Blue Books and the Horizons magazines. Those are 2 really good resource or reference materials that will give you overviews of different communities in your area, along with a lot of other resources available to seniors. So if you're starting to need some extra services or extra help with something, it's a great go-to to have a resource guide like that. And if you need a resource guide from me, I'm happy to send you one of those as well. All right. So to finish up, I just want to say thank you for your time today. I hope that you found the information helpful. I hope that you've got some good questions that I can answer for you. I also want to offer a gift. This is a book it's a short read, it's an easy read, and it's written from a gentleman about him and his wife's journey of deciding to downsize, as he says, downsizing in his 70s. It's just kind of the process that him and his wife went through. It's a light, easy read, and it's helpful. So I'd like to offer that as a gift to you. You can see my contact information is there. Please email me or give me a call. I bought lots of them, so I'm happy to send one to any and all of you that would like a copy of that. If you're thinking about making a change, this is a good read for you. All right, that's the end of my presentation, so let's see if we've got some questions.
Well, first of all, let me just tell you that I've been through many of these through the years, and your presentation was outstanding. A really comprehensive overview of the various options and the pricing options, which I thought was very helpful. You know, I'm not terribly out of that age group away from making those kind of decisions. So, you know, for me, it was just really informative, and I'm sure all of our participants really enjoyed it. We do have some questions. I've got some questions. And perhaps one thing, though, that you could touch on, I know you'd mentioned the long-term policy, you know, reviewing it, but typically what do they cover when it comes to, and what are just some basic limitations and limitations on amounts that you see?
Gosh, there's a big range, but typically what an LTC policy is going to cover is usually some kind of per diem reimbursement rate. And I've seen anywhere from, on average, $120 a day to $160 a day. So if you're in a long-term care that runs $320 a day, you know, about a third of that or so is going to be covered by that long-term care policy. Almost all long-term care policies cover long-term care or skilled nursing. Many of them include coverage for assisted living stays. And over the years, more recent years, they've started to include home care coverage. And again, it's going to typically be at that same per diem rate of $120 to $140 or $160 a day. That's going to be a typical sort of average, if you will. Although there's, depending on the policy you bought, the premiums you were willing to spend, the coverage could be more.
Excellent, thank you. And tell us a little bit more about your facility that you work at. You've got all of these various options, correct?
We do not. We are strictly active adult where we're at Avenida Lakewood. I have worked in independent living, assisted living, and memory care, and I was excited about this particular project, largely because it's tough for families when you're saying we're going to charge $3,000 a month for 600 square feet. That seems like a lot. And maybe your meals will be included and maybe they won't, depending on which community you're at. There's, a lot of variation on meal plans, anywhere from we'll give you 12 meals a month to we include all your meals. And then what I find happens in those communities is people want to complain about the food because they get tired of eating in the same dining room for every single meal. And so it just lends itself to people getting bored and frustrated with the food. So I was excited about this opportunity because we offer 800 square feet for $1,700 a month starting at prices, which is just a better price point, I think, for a lot of people, but we still offer the programs and the activities and the things that give you purpose and enjoyment and engagement. We still offer all of that, all the good, the fun stuff.
And so does your rent include that, or do you have to pay extra for all of those amenities?
The rent includes all of that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And are there income qualifications for the various levels of the apartments?
There are not. If you go out and rent a multifamily apartment somewhere, just a traditional apartment building, most of those places are going to do some kind of income verification. They want to see typically 2 to 3 times the rent cost of your income. So if the rent is, $1,500, they want to see that you have at least $3,000 or $4,500 a month in income. We do not do that at our community. We know that seniors are many times on fixed incomes. And so we don't put them through that process. If they feel comfortable with the pricing, then we're good with that. We do a background screen to make sure there's no criminal activity or background for the safety of our residents, but that's really it. We're pretty straightforward with how we approach it.
Excellent. How difficult has it been to market Avenida's services and amenities during this COVID crisis?
That is a great question. It was challenging. We definitely followed a lot of protocols. We did kind of close our doors to having a lot of visitors and tours and walk-in activity. We have since reopened them, but we did a lot of virtual tours. So I had to get good at taking videos and doing voiceovers and kind of a new skill set in my bag, so to speak. But it's been interesting. I will say that active adult communities by very nature are less inclined to have as many outbreaks or issues with COVID simply by virtue of the fact that we do not have staff that go from room to room to room. We don't have housekeepers that do that. We don't have dining staff that's doing that. We don't have care staff that's doing that. So we've been very fortunate that we've not had major issues with COVID. I will say I was going to actually just read here some statistics about this because I know this is a hot topic right now. But this is according to some data that was reported from May 31st. 105 senior housing care operators confirmed positive tests were the highest at nursing homes at 4.3%, followed by memory care at 3.7%. And on a note to keep in mind on that, memory care, it's very hard to quarantine people. They don't know to stay in their apartment. And so of course they're going to wander around and So that it's just tough in memory care to manage that kind of situation. Assisted living, only 1.2% tested positive. And then in independent living, 0.2% tested positive. So you can see that the higher the care level, the greater the risk for COVID having an outbreak in your building. So in the active adult arena, we've had almost none.
Excellent. We have a question about how long the videos are going to be available in the presentations. They'll be available at dailycamera.com/aging and on YouTube. They'll always be available, so they'll be out there forever. There's a question that you're going to have to draw upon maybe some of your previous experience. What's the average wait list time for Medicaid beds or rooms in nursing homes or assisted living communities?
That's a great question. Typically, I don't want to scare people with this, but typically most communities that take Medicaid are going to want a minimum of 2 to 3 years spend down. So that means you're going to privately pay until you are down to your final $2,000 worth of assets. And then, you know, they want 2 to 3 years of a spend down. Now, I have seen situations where that wasn't the case because they had an influx of beds become available or rooms become available, and all of a sudden they had some availability and they could take people on a shorter, you know, 6-month or 1 year basis. But if you suspect that you're going to need Medicaid care at some point, you want to plan usually 2 to 3 years.
Can you talk a little bit about the meal plans? I know you said that you gave the pricing, but just take, for example, in your community, how do the meal plans work, and what price ranges are there for meal plans?
So at my community, we provide a continental breakfast Monday through Saturday. That's included. We don't pay additional for that. And that whole piece is about the socialization, the opportunity to get together, you know, have something to eat, and get, you know, meet up with your neighbors and find out what you'd like to do for the day. It's more of a social piece than it is about the food. But when I talked about meal plans, really for us, we have full kitchens, and most of my residents still do some cooking, still enjoy some cooking. There are other meal plans available that people, if they've decided, I don't want to cook anymore, I'm done with that, that they can bring in and have meal delivery options available. And that's anywhere, like I said, from typically you're going to see anywhere from about $8 to $12 a meal, where meals are fully prepared. All they have to do is warm them up. Or if they still want to do a little cooking, you can order where things are kind of prepped for you ahead of time, and all you have to do is finish them off in a pan and get them on the table. Those meals can be anywhere from $5 to $8 a meal, is kind of what I've seen. There's a lot of services available now for meals.
These active adult communities, not only yours, they might have even their own restaurants that people could go to and order food.
Typically not. The reason for that is once we get into having a restaurant on site, we have to have a chef and a sous chef and wait staff, and all of a sudden the price point just starts jumping, because to maintain that restaurant and maintain that staffing becomes pretty expensive. And that's why those independent living communities are starting at $3,000 a month.
What's the difference between assisted living and long-term care?
Cost. So basically, long-term care is a higher level of care. They're going to be able to provide a higher level of medical care than an assisted living is going to be able to. They have more nursing staff on site 24 hours a day versus an assisted living that's typically going to have a nurse on staff during the day and perhaps on call at night, but not there available in the community. So it just has to do with that level of medical care that's provided from long-term care at the highest level to then assisted living is right below that.
So we've had this kind of question before, and this one's a little bit broad, but what if mom doesn't want to go to either assisted living or more of a care facility living, and moving out of her home? So what advice do you have, and how can you help there?
That's a tough one, because you can't really make people move. unless you have guardianship. And going through a guardianship process is quite lengthy and involved. And if mom is able to make decisions for herself, typically you're not going to be able to force her to move. What's a better approach is to have honest conversation about making a move before there's a major crisis. And then many times in my experience, what I've seen is you can't force mom to make the move. You wait until there is a crisis and then you make the move, because they just simply cannot go back to their house safely. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. There's a chat here that says, and there's a new place in Longmont. Oh, came off my screen. Sorry about that. A new place in Longmont called Atria.
Atria.
Are you familiar with it? And what are the levels of care? And do you know anything about the costs there?
The Atria is, yes, it's a newer community. They do have independent living. They also have assisted living and memory care. And that's a common model that you're going to see these days, is a lot of these communities will have independent living, assisted living, and memory care on campus as well. And the cost is going to vary depending on which care level you're at. If you're in independent living, you're going to look at starting at $3,000 a month. Probably in a 2-bedroom, we're looking at more like $4,500 to $5,000 a month for a 2-bedroom. If you're moving up to the assisted living, your typical cost there is probably going to be $5,000 to $7,000. It would be a reasonable number there. And then for memory care, it should be about the same or just a little bit more.
And tell us a little bit more about the active adult facility that you're working with. What's the transportation situation? Can I'm assuming the people that live there have vehicles, or they can opt for Ubers and Lyfts and things like that. Do you also offer on-site transportation?
We do not. We provide transportation for off-site outings. For example, we took all our residents to go see the Monet exhibit. We rented buses and took our residents for that. And so any off-site outing that we provide, we provide the transportation for that. But most of my residents drive. For those that don't, there's a couple of really nice options where I'm at. We have the Senior Resource Center and we have Lakewood Rides. Both of those will provide transportation services, but you do have to schedule usually 2 to 3 days ahead of time. So if it's doctor's appointments, typically you know when those appointments are going to be, you're going to schedule it. And then they ask for very minimal donations, $3 or $4 per ride. If you need something that's truly on demand, you're going to be looking at Uber, Lyft, or GoGo Grandma. GoGo Grandma is kind of nice because you don't have to have a smartphone. You don't have to be tech savvy. You can just call them up and they will come and give you a taxi ride. So those are kind of your options here in the Lakewood area.
Excellent, thank you. And one of the other questions I had was, what kind of growth are you expecting, and are they projecting for adult living resort style communities like yours?
I think over the next 5 years, well, this
forward.
is a tough one to answer because there's a lot of unknown and uncertainty surrounding the COVID situation. That could affect our senior living industry in a profound way, and we don't really know what that would look like yet. But taking that piece aside, I would say that over the next 5 to 10 years, I would expect to see more and more active adult communities popping up, and less of the traditional independent living and assisted living communities.
And are there any planned for, or are there any active living communities now in Longmont? We got a question.
There are not, unfortunately. My company has looked at, I think Fort Collins, but we have not. We're looking at a site up north, but nothing that I'm aware of that is planned in Longmont. I'm sorry for whoever that was that says they want to stay in Longmont. I understand completely.
Well, I think we're out of questions. We're going to end just a little bit early, and I just want to thank you, Shelley, for really an outstanding presentation. You answered so many questions. by laying it out the way you did. We're so appreciative, and I know all of the people that are on the that are participating in this webinar are appreciative as well. So
Thank
thank
you.
you, and we wish everyone a good afternoon.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.